Alright, so how many of you have seen the movie Titanic? Most of you. Okay. How many of you knew the Titanic sinking was a real event? Okay. On April 14th, 1912, on its maiden voyage, the RMS Titanic struck a submerged iceberg. There were an insufficient amount of lifeboats on board, and a majority of them were filled at only half capacity. Out of 2,223 passengers aboard the Titanic, only 706 survived. The tragedy of the Titanic is a widely known story thanks to the popular movie starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. However, I wanted to examine the story in a different way. I explored how the media coverage shaped how people understood what was going on at the time, and how the media continues to affect the way people see the event. At the time of the tragedy, the main type of media coverage was newspapers. The newspapers got their information from any radio wires sent from the Titanic before it sank, the other ships who were on the way to help, and the White Star Line offices. I found that the newspapers at the time were more likely to publish speculation as fact. To this end, I followed the experience of Anna Sophia Thurha, an actual passenger on the Titanic, and her family that she was traveling to see. At the time of the tragedy, Anna was 18 years old. I wanted to use a character that was close to my age, so I could better understand her on that level. Anna was also Finnish, and throughout her experience, there was a language barrier problem. While I considered having Anna speak Finnish in my project, I realized that I would need some sort of translator throughout the story. So throughout the story, her pieces appear in English. This is my historical fiction story in the form of diary entries, letters, scenes, and newspaper articles. On March 15th, 1912. Dearest Anna, we would love for you to move to America with us. John and I live in Ashtabula, Ohio. John owns his own butcher shop, and the business is going very well. He has even offered a job to you at his shop if you come. He insisted that I include enough money for the ticket on the RMS Titanic. It leaves very soon, and we hear it's the best. Unfortunately, we can't afford anything better than a third-class ticket. Anna, you should come and meet Irene. She just turned 3 years old, and she is such a handful. I would love for Irene to get to know an aunt. We would love it if you come to visit us, if not stay with us. The money is included in the letter. Please book a ticket on the Titanic. It's March 15th here, and I'm not sure when you will get this, but I hope it's a time to buy a ticket. Love, Maria Thurha Lundy. April 3rd, 1912. Dearest Diary. Today is the 3rd of April, and we are currently in Hanko, Finland, and are heading out for Southampton in the morning, in time to board the Titanic. I sent out a letter today to Maria and her husband to let them know that I was going to arrive soon. It was so nice of them to send me money for a ticket on the Titanic. $58 is just too much money for me, even if it is a third-class ticket. I met the nicest girl today. Her name is Erna Alexandra Anderson. She is also from Finland, and she's only a year younger than me. I believe we're going to be close friends. We are both in the 3rd class on the Titanic, but we won't be rooming together. She told me that once she gets to New York, she plans on working as a domestic worker. I told her how I was planning on going to Ashtabula, Ohio to work with my sister's husband in her butcher shop. We spent hours talking about different things. Well, I should get some sleep before tomorrow. Anna. April 15th, 1912. Honey, look what is in the newspaper today, John said, walking in the front door carrying the Ashtabula Star Beacon. What is it, dear? Maria asked, walking in the living room, wiping her hands on the dishcloth. It says the Titanic collided with an iceberg. Oh my goodness, is everyone okay? Maria rushes to John's side and grabs the paper. She starts reading the article. Titanic wrecked by iceberg. Wireless saves 2,000 passengers and crew. Kept afloat by only her watertight compartments, the great White Star liner Titanic is slowly crawling to harbor. Her passengers were taken off and put aboard other steamers in mid-ocean. The disaster of the Titanic is unequaled in the history of navigation. The largest, most luxurious, and best appointed vessel that ever floated. She seemed proof against any disaster. Hardly another ship afloat could have withstood the terrific shock when the Titanic, driving through the night at more than half speed ahead, crashed their bow into the great submerged iceberg. Oh, John, do you think Anna was on board? Do you think she's okay? We don't know if she even decided to travel on the Titanic. We shouldn't worry unless we know for sure she decided to come, John said, trying to calm down his wife. I guess you're right, Maria said as she turned back to the kitchen to finish dishes. There was a knock at the front door. John answered it and warmly greeted Maddie Turha, Maria and Anna's brother. Where's Maria? Maddie asked in a hurry, a little out of breath. In the kitchen. Maria, Maddie is here, John called out. Maria came hurrying out of the kitchen, re-wiping her soapy hands on the dishcloth. Have you seen this? Maddie asked them, holding up the newspaper from Cleveland, Ohio. We saw the Ashtabula Star-Beacon's article on the Titanic hitting an iceberg. I'm so glad that everyone made it safely, Maria said, holding John's arm. You should hear this article then. Maddie starts reading aloud. The great steamship is sinking. New York, April 15th. A wireless message from the Titanic, received shortly after midnight, announced the liner had struck an iceberg off the banks of Newfoundland and was starting to sink. Transfer of the passengers to lifeboats began at once. The accident occurred at 10:25 o'clock last night. 2 hours later, the ship's wireless apparatus failed completely. The last words sent by the operator told that the vessel was apparently doomed, sinking by the head, and that the women passengers were being rushed into lifeboats. Have you heard any word from Anna about whether or not she decided to journey on the Titanic? Maddie asked. No, we haven't heard anything yet, Maria said, staring at the newspaper article in Maddie's hand. Honey, I'm sure wherever Anna is, she's fine. Yeah, I'm sure she's fine, Maria said, in an echo to John's attempt at comfort. April 16th, 1912. Hi, honey, did you pick up the newspaper? Maria asks before he even has a chance to shut the door behind him. Yeah, but it's not good, John said. Maria grabbed the Ashtabula newspaper and started reading out loud before he could warn her any further. He held the Cleveland paper under his other arm. 1,350 passengers perished when steamer Titanic sinks. Loss largest in world history. Hundreds of telephone calls and telegraphic inquiries poured into the offices of the White Star Line, asking for information as to the safety of friends and relatives who were on the Titanic. The earlier information given out by the local officials of the line were responsible for the incorrect information that all the Titanic's passengers were safe on the Carpathia. The Carpathia reached the Titanic position at daybreak and found only boats and wreckage. Both passengers and crew are among those saved. Of passengers saved, nearly all are women and children. Oh my, Maria drops the paper and grips John's arm as if she's afraid of falling over. John, what if Anna was on the Titanic? April 18th, 1912. Maria. John walks in the door from work with the paper under his arm. In here, a quiet voice calls from the living room. John walks in to see Maria sitting on the sofa with a piece of paper on her lap. Maria looks up at him, her face wet from crying. It's a letter from Anna, she said, holding up the piece of paper. Let me see, John takes the letter and starts to read. As he realizes that Anna must have been on the Titanic's maiden voyage, his hand slowly drops the letter to his side, staring at his wife. I could feel something was wrong, Maria said. Maddie walks in the front door. Hi, did you see this article? He asks, holding up the Greenville Journal newspaper. Someone left this on my doorstep. He hands it to John, who starts to read it out loud. Largest ship sinks. Great ocean liner Titanic goes down after collision with iceberg. Passengers are saved by lifeboats. New York. The new White Star liner Titanic, the largest vessel in the world, was struck by an iceberg 2 days before she was arrived in New York Harbor and sank in a few hours. The weather conditions were favorable, and tidings of the disaster, sent by wireless, brought other vessels to her aid, and all of the passengers were taken off safely. The ship, however, is a total loss. After John finishes reading, he looks at Maria, who doesn't seem to be paying attention. John hands Maddie the letter and goes to Maria to comfort her, while Maddie reads. While John is rubbing his wife's back, Maddie lets out a long exhale. Now I wish this Greenville article were true. Then I wouldn't have to worry about Anna, Maddie said. He carefully folds up Anna's letter and returns it to Maria. I wish we could figure out if Anna was alive or not, Maria said, choking on the words she thought she wouldn't have to say anytime soon. You know what? I have an idea. Give me a moment, dear sister. Maddie patted Maria's hand and walked out the door, striding with purpose. Where do you think he went? Maria asked John, and proceeded to shrug his shoulders. A while later, Maddie came back in with a defeated air about him. I went to a telephone booth and called the White Star Line office, and they told me Anna is on the lost persons list. No, wait, I wasn't done, he said as Maria started to break down. They also said that the list isn't as accurate as they would like. So at the moment she could be alive, but they won't know for sure until Carpathy arrives tonight. So there's still hope, Maria asked. Yeah, there's still hope, Maddie replied. April 18th, 1912. Dear Diary, I'm not sure what day it is. I've understood bits of conversation that say we're heading to New York Harbor. After we were pulled aboard the Carpathia, I found Erna. I'm so happy she made it too because so many didn't. We are currently huddled under a blanket together on the deck of the Carpathia. A kind lady gave us the blanket, and when I asked, she gave me the pencil so I could write in my diary. I don't know why, but I happened to grab my diary before I left my cabin on the Titanic. I'm so happy that I did, because I need to put my thoughts down, just to make sure it wasn't a dream. The cries, I cannot even describe how awful they sounded. I don't ever think I'll stop hearing those cries and the screams of those people as they were dying. I don't understand why the man in charge of Lifeboat 15 wouldn't pull anybody on board. He said he didn't want to sink it, but we had plenty of room left. They were in the water, and yet we couldn't help them. As the night went on, the cries died down, and pretty soon it was still across the water. I'll never forget how the water looked like smooth glass instead of something that could move. I'm afraid to fall asleep. I'm afraid of the nightmares that soon may follow my eyes closing. Erna is sleeping next to me. She keeps twisting and turning, and sometimes she wakes up in a panic. Many of the passengers on this ship do. We can't forget the unsinkable ship sinking. I think I should wake up Erna now, because she's starting to cry, so I will sign off and hope to see another day on this earth. Anna. May 13th, 1912. Dear Diary, it's been almost a month since the Titanic sank, and the White Star Line finally took my name off the lost persons list, so my family in Finland knows I'm alive and well. I'm living at Maria and John's house, and I watch and entertain my niece Irene. Maria and John were so happy to see me, and they have been so understanding, while I try to cope with the memories of that night. I decided not to take the job that John offered at the butcher shop, because I just can't stand the sight of anything suffering, ever since that night filled with cries. I've met someone. He seems like a really nice man, and he can make me smile. His name is Emil Lundy, and he's John's brother, so I know I can trust him. I have managed to keep in contact with Erna by way of letters, and I know she is doing well as a domestic worker. She is still in New York and seems to have found herself a man to date. I have been having problems with reporters trying to ask me about my experience on the Titanic and its sinking. I am trying so hard to forget some of those memories, but I feel like eventually all of those lost souls will be forgotten, and it's my job and the other survivors' jobs to keep the memory and their memory of the tragedy alive. I continue to ask myself why God would choose to spare me, a poor Finnish girl, when all those rich people drowned. However, I cannot find the answer I'm looking for. I will continue to pray that I find the answers to my questions, and that God will comfort all those who have lost loved ones in the tragedy. Erna. The media coverage in the United States affected many families of loved ones traveling on the Titanic. Because the newspapers were printing the wrong information, families were given a false sense of security in the first few days after the tragedy. According to the first round of articles, all of the passengers were transferred to nearby ships, and the Titanic was still floating. Even when mixed information came in, either by radio or the White Star Line, the newspapers started printing with the wrong number of people who died and survived. Today's media still has a control over how society views the Titanic tragedy. They keep reminding society of the disaster, not only of how it happened, but also the people involved with the sinking and those who survived. Numerous books and movies have hit the market, and the media uses that to relate it back to the tragedy. When survivors were alive, the media would often ask their opinion of the particular text that was receiving so much attention. While some might say that this is the media trying to keep the memory alive, it can also be seen as the media attempting to grasp onto a new take of the story that has been told so many times before. Society should care that the media is controlling how we see certain events, because we may only be given one side of a story, or the media makes a story seem like what it's not. We as a society need to understand, to take what the media says and learn to analyze it for what the story is actually about. The Titanic tragedy is not about the love story like it is in the movie. It's about the tragic loss of lives, the survivors affected by the tragedy, and the way the media portrays those involved with the Titanic's end.
At this time, we'd like to open it up to questions and answers from the audience.
Could you say a little bit about some of the choices you made with the characters? So, a Finnish woman, Ashtabula, Ohio, are these sort of chance choices, or what sort of motive you to?
Well, actually, Ashtabula is where she was going, where she was heading to her family. I tried to keep as much of the real story about it as possible. I think I even used a couple of her quotes throughout the piece. I wanted to speak to her character and what she actually went through and her family.
So I understand that this was all done through newspaper, right, back at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So if something like this was to happen nowadays, given kind of social media and Twitter and all that sort of stuff, how do you think that would have affected, kind of the social impact of the sinking?
I think it would have been a lot more widespread now than it was back then. Like newspapers, they have only like a few sources that they could use, and even those people at that time didn't know what was actually happening because, well, the wireless apparatus it failed on the Titanic, and the Carpathia ended up closing down its radio services because they were tired of getting so many inquiries to people on the Titanic. So they waited until everyone arrived in the harbor to figure out who was actually alive and dead. So I think that nowadays, I think it would be a lot easier to get the information across that was needed to make the right call for the newspapers or any other social media for that matter. Yes.
What is, in your personal opinion, the reason why Titanic and the story of this disaster is still popular today? We still have to tell it and tell it again. Why is it your imagination?
I think for the most part, at that time it was like, the world's largest loss of lives, and so I think we're still stuck on that, and the fact that it was its maiden voyage and it was so talked up before the tragedy occurred, that people stuck onto that, like the claim that it was unsinkable, that was actually boosted more after the tragedy occurred. So I think that the media just tried to grasp onto whose fault it was, and the survivors that maybe had a part in the Titanic's end. So I think people like telling a good tragedy story, to be honest. It sounds awful, but that's, I mean, we still hear about a lot of tragedies that have occurred in the past. That answers your question. Sorry.
I was just thinking, because we never found out where that plane, like, we've had so many plane things happen
Yeah.
recently, but I can't see him ever, I know there wasn't quite the loss of life, but I can't see him ever getting the play that Titanic had. So, yeah, it was so new, and traveling by ship was still,
Yeah, and traveling in that luxury on a ship.
I guess, the luxury part.
Yeah. That's very true about the planes. Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Thank you.
Sorry. Any other questions?
Then please join me in thanking Rebecca for her presentation at Student Scholar Days this year.